Hey everyone, Sakurayasen here, and welcome to another episode of Pointy Chins, where I take you through my art journey. Alright, so I'm still in this stage of figuring things out with this style, trying to put all the pieces together. It's getting closer, and I think it's only a couple more months before things sort of crystallize and then they're working. But yeah, it is definitely, like with the faces, they're closer. The bodies are sort of fluctuating. I feel one of the things I'm still not getting at this point is how to simplify them into larger shapes. And then like this one, he's just the muscles and things, it's not quite working, but it's close. It's almost there. So here's what I mean by simplifying it. I just did this one, this one, this one, and this one. And you can see, especially with this guy in the bottom, you can see how the changes kind of help the appeal, creating more simple shapes with more rhythm. In the case of the bigger lady, just shortening her legs a lot, making more of a cohesive shape. So here where the shape is really, it's easier to combine the body with the legs into one larger shape. And the same thing with this lady, just sort of bringing more of a big triangle into it, which balances the upside down triangle of her head. So you've got really two triangles, and they've got much more flow, whereas this one is a bit, it's not quite there. Yep, so, I mean, this one's okay. It's getting better with proportions. I like this face, and I really like this one as just an image. I think it looks kind of pretty. But there's also ones that aren't quite there, like this one. I don't feel like I don't feel like it's really working. It's got a lot of bumps everywhere, but they don't feel like there's an overriding shape to it. And so it looks more like a collection of bumps. And you don't, I feel like it's not really good to have that. But this was probably the biggest turning point for me with this girl. Because I looked at the proportions and was like, you know what, that works. That looks good. I think the body is working with the head. And then I started, I was doing these types of proportions where I'm really shrinking the body and shrinking the legs. So in a usual figure, you might have one that's like 7.5 heads tall. This is much less than that. It's like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 5 heads tall. But it still feels appealing, and I think that's something that's really important to get, is find what shapes work for you. I wouldn't have thought, like a 5-head figure would work. I would probably think like, well, that's too chibi-like or something, but it does work with the heads that I have, so that's something that you kind of have to go with what you've got and work with it. So if I like drawing heads a certain way, well, I'm going to have to adjust the body. And even though I might not think that's what I want to do, at the end when I look at the result, it does feel good. So these proportions, although they're not perfect, they are feeling a lot better. Even this kid, it's a bit better. Some of these are, not quite there, but overall, I like this person's face. Overall, it's a lot closer. So here, I really narrowed the torso area, but I kept the arms kind of big, and I made the legs to the point where they almost are the same, or they are pretty much the same width as the waist going down, which isn't, crazy, but I think overall, it's working quite well. And in this case, I think the head is bigger than it's wider than the torso. So these are just little observations you end up finding as you just discover and experiment and try new things. Or what you could do is just find someone who already has a style that you like and just break it down that way. But I decided to do it kind of from scratch, which, you know, it's not always the best way to go about doing things. In fact, it's probably the slowest way. But in the end, I guess the advantage is that you get a pretty in-depth grasp of things. However, I do think if I was starting again, I probably would just find someone who's got a style and proportions I like, and then try to copy it as best as I can, so I learn why they do things, and some of the things you only figure out when you actually draw it. Then you can learn, like, okay, you made this wide like this because of this reason. Whereas if you're just commenting on someone who's already done their style, and you're coming in with your own ideas, like, for instance, let's say this kid, right? You might look and say, like, oh, the waist is super skinny, and that's because you're trying to say people should be skinny, and they attribute all these reasons, whereas really it's just like, no, it's just a shape difference between, like, a wider shape, and then it narrows, and then it gets wider again. It's just a collection of shapes. It's not a social commentary or anything like that. So, yeah, still playing around, kind of like this person's expression. I have no idea what's going on with this one, though. I get that this is some kind of mouth, I think, but I don't really understand at all what that is. And then with this one, I wanted this feeling like she's wearing this collar that's built out of organic shapes, and it's just sort of got a flow to it. So you might be able to see the original drawing is this big oval, this big ellipse type shape, and then you got a bunch of lines coming out, and then on top of that you turn it into whatever. But it's got a very basic starting point, and that's really what I like to do nowadays, is start really basic. Make sure, even on a very, very simple level, it looks good. And then when it looks good on the most simple level, then you just have to make sure the next step looks good and make it a bit more detailed, and then a bit more detailed. And I think of it like the blank page is the hardest thing to deal with. So if you just put down a shape, and the shape is good and confident and whatever, and that's something you just get from practicing drawing and learning, like, well, this shape looks nice, that shape looks nice. As long as you get that down, then you're no longer dealing with a blank page, you're dealing with a shape that looks pretty good. And then it's like, okay, within this shape, what can I do with it? Well, where can I put eyes or nose? Like if you're doing a face, where can I put the features? Or if you're doing a composition or a body or something, how do you fit everything in? Now this page is pretty, this is actually done by another personality, which is why the style is very different. And sometimes I just get this where I can't really draw, and then there's this feeling of something else in my head that wants to draw, and I just let it have that. And so I don't know, this is more like my black sketchbook stuff, but apparently there's a lot of, I don't know, it feels burnt out, it feels lost, there's a lot of frustration. It kind of looks very painful. Whereas this is just thumbnails, and I guess the level of emotion is much less than in this one. It's a lot more cartoony, but still kind of abstract and weird, especially this one. It's a very weird head, but I kind of don't mind it. I don't know. Art. It's art. Okay, so I guess I was experimenting with some creature people. This head is very big on this body. I guess I was still, trying to figure things out. This one is kind of working with some of the structural things. You can see some of these rhythm lines. Like, you have this rhythm line of the cheekbone going into the chin. I think that's really good to have. Same with the brow. Like these lines that are helping to not only get the anatomy but also get the flow, they're really important. And with muscles, they do create a flow. Actually, when I think of the human body, I think of it in like it's a really impressive thing where you have flow because of mechanics, and this is like a muscle or a bone. To move it, you need muscles, and then you need a certain rhythm so that everything kind of works and there's enough room. And by the end of it, you've just created this, or not created, but you have a very elegant machine, which I think is cool. So yeah, I kind of like this one in these proportions with the very big thighs. Partial to that. So looks like here I was doing some studies from photos, and yeah, I guess it's kind of like I found the proportion that I like more, and now I want to play around with it and see what I can do. So making sure that I can do studies and maintain the proportion is kind of important. These ones are kind of broken, went a bit too far, but they're from imagination, so that's what happens. Kind of like the expression on this one, yeah. But it feels like the features are too big on the face. Like there's not enough face and too much features. So it feels like there's too much positive space and not enough negative space, which I don't think works. And it's something I see in a lot of these. It feels like there's too much. Like I look at these and I really get the sense of like, you're close, but like it's a bit too much. And this one, it feels like the features are floating too much towards the middle. Because if you look at the big head, the features are roughly in the middle, but it feels to me anyway that they're too high. And so what I would do is more like this. So just reduce some of the size and kind of bring them lower, and I think it looks a bit better. Like doop doop doop. Not huge changes, but minor changes. I think they help. Yeah. So moving along. So here I'm still playing around with the body, but trying to figure out how to place the muscles. I don't think this is the best way of doing it, but it's okay. And I like how I'm still trying to get different body shapes. Here's like a bigger one. Here's a more skinny one. With some of them though, like this one, it feels the body's too big. This is a nice face. And I like this one. This one, it feels kind of off balance. Like it feels like the legs need to be pushed back. Otherwise, it doesn't seem like she's going to be able to stand. With this one, it's close, but it feels like his body is just too skinny. And it's too much stylization, but not correctly. So just added a bit more body. Like it's still crazy stylized, but at least, just bringing it more like that. At least it's a bit more plausible in a way. Or, I mean, he still looks like he's got a giant head, but it feels more like a guy with a giant head. Whereas this one feels kind of it's got a bit too much oddness to it, strangeness. Drawing some faces here. And I still jump between, I guess, the style, more like an anime-esque style thing, and then I have caricature, and then I have realism and like realistic drawings. And these three, I think of them kind of like points on a triangle that I keep bouncing around, and I'm trying to find the center of that triangle. And when I find the center of the triangle, then I think I'd be pretty happy with that. But it tends to shift between being more cartoony or more stylized anyway, more caricatured or more realistic or more like anime, like cool, I guess you could say. Like some of these faces. These the features are getting better. They're a bit smaller now. This one's a bit of a disaster, but and the reason it's a disaster is it just feels like the features aren't properly placed. This structure doesn't feel like the chin is in the right spot, so I would move this back, stuff like that. It's just when I look at it, it just feels off. And here's some more crickets, which I always enjoy. This one is probably the first drawing of the page, so it's not quite there, but it gets a bit better as things go on. And I always find it easier to draw very small figures when I want to keep proportion. So here it looks like she has some kind of weird visor thing. That's interesting. All right. So this character, I made this RPG Maker game a few months back because I was kind of bored, and it stars a guy called Turbojit. Turbo is his nickname, and kind of looks like this. And I basically was trying to draw from memory the character from the game, but first I had to do some studies. So these are studies because I didn't know how the turban works really, and I learned, okay, it's basically, you got from the front anyway, you got like this part and then this part and then this part, so like 1, 2, 3, and there you have it. So it's actually a lot less complicated than I thought. But yeah, it's from this game I made called Indie Bindi. Anyway, and this is the main character, Turbojit, and he's still in prison at this point, and he's got a tail, because I was just using their default sprites, but like kind of altering them, but not too much. And then later he escapes. You might be able to see he's wearing his full outfit there. He's got glasses, and this is his friend, Demon Ghost Chang, and yeah, so that's why I was doing these. Just some I don't know why. I was thinking, like, I have this desire to do some kind of IP that's lighthearted, that's stupid. It's not like Affinity. It's not serious. And this was one idea. Didn't really come to pass. I ended up settling on an idea that you'll get to see in later episodes of Pointy Chins. But yeah, it was an idea. Here's another kind of stretched version of that. I'm trying to think about movement and rhythm a lot. Again, stuff I've talked about a bunch of times. And here, I'm really thinking about the shape of the head as this sort of bean-like shape, and then playing around with it. Like, these are all similar shapes, but they're kind of pushed and pulled in different directions. I guess this one is a bit different, but still very simple shapes. And then you build the head on these simple shapes. And because a simple shape works, the rest works too. Like, this one isn't very good in terms of placement, but this one's much better. And also it looks like it's off a much simpler shape. So I'm a big fan of very simple shapes. And then these are studies of Miwashiro, and just seeing, like, okay, that's how they do it. I didn't get that much. Like, when I look at it now, I can see a bunch of stuff that I would take from this style. But at the time, it doesn't seem like it sticks too much in my head. But yeah, that's how it goes anyway. You know, you try your best and move on. So here, I don't know, I did some old punk grandpa guy. And this is more on that triangle I mentioned with realism and the cartoony and the anime. This is more towards realism, I suppose. Thinner lines, more hatching, more details, and I'm not sure if they're good lines or not, but they are what they are. And then here, I'm just trying to scribble, so I'm kind of using the pen more like a brush. I'm trying not to think of it as a drawing tool, and more like making stuff out of areas of line that turn into tone. I don't know if that made any sense. But basically, you just make a bunch of quick lines to suggest tone. Like this guy, he's not so much drawn. There is some drawing here, but there's a lot of it is just defined by areas of light and shadow. And that is created by just, making hatching. So, yeah, working with eyes. Here, I really noticed that, especially with guys, mostly with guys, the eyes can be very, very thin. And I have a tendency to make the eyes a bit bigger, kind of like this. They tend to be a bit on the larger side, and I was thinking like maybe I need to shrink those down. And I realized like with guys in general, it tends to look better when they're a lot thinner. It looks more masculine anyway. So that was the revelation of that day. And here I'm trying to work out the proportions and like, okay, so 1 head, 2 head, 3, 4, 5, 6-ish, 5 and something heads tall. I think it could be adjusted, and I also feel like the balance is off here a bit. Maybe bring the neck closer to a middle area. Right now it's too much on the back. This one's a bit better, and it's got better gesture to it. But in terms of proportions, I feel like the body still could be smaller. I also learned a lot about why certain cartoon things are the way they are. Like, why do they always make these big heads on these little bodies? Well, it's because it actually works. And when you have big heads, it's not just that you are making a big head, it's that you're increasing the size of something based on its importance. So the size of the head is big because that's what we focus on, and maybe the hands are big because those are also important for expression. The eyes are big. The mouth, I guess that's one thing that usually the mouth is a bit smaller, but maybe in some cases the mouth is big. But again, it's just what is necessary for communication of an idea, for expressiveness. And then those areas end up actually larger and kind of balances out in the end. Whereas if you have something like a very stylized head with a very realistic body, it just looks misplaced. But like, I like this proportion. I think this is quite nice. This one is okay. Some of these are okay. It's working. It's resolving. And something I did learn was really how, depending on what the head shape is, the body shape tends to get very, very different. So even though I might have a 5 heads tall person or a 6 heads tall person, if the head is more narrow and long, chances are the body's going to get pushed as well in that way. A person who's more fat doesn't look the same as the same person who's more skinny in terms of their skeleton, which is weird, but that's just how it is. Not in real life, of course, but in stylization, you kind of change a lot of things to get something that looks correct, even though it's not realistic. So there is a difference between realism and correctness. So here I was trying to do some fashion things from imagination. I didn't quite get this. Like, I don't think the flow would be exactly like this, but it's... I thought like it's okay, but that's only because I don't really do fashion-y things at all. Drapery and stuff, I'm quite bad with drapery, so for me it was okay, but as a whole it's not really great. Some kind of Venom sketch, and here I was kind of playing around, I think, with like the Cynic's mask thing. I didn't quite do it right, and also this is wonky, so that's a big failure, quite embarrassing there. So in this case, again, it's that feature weirdness where it's close, but it's not quite there in terms of placement. Like, all this could be lowered. Same with this. This eye could be pushed a bit back, and then it's going to have a lot more sense to it. I think you really have to be able to imagine the eye socket and the skeleton, the skull, within the head. And then when things are all working, it's when all the elements kind of fit. So going back to what I was saying about the body as a machine and sort of engineering and things, with good engineering, a thing doesn't just look good, it works, it functions. And so with the faces and the bodies and things, there's got to be the same sense that it functions. And here, I guess I was going back to my Pointy Chins style. I mean, surprisingly, when I think about it, there's a lot of deviation from the original when I had just figured out about a concave lines. So this is a bit concave, still a bit convex, but yeah. So playing around with different heads, head shapes, and I'm still kind of working off ovals and circles, which is okay. This is getting better, the head to neck connection. That's better. I think I'm still making the back of the head a bit too big though. Like it could just go into the, like this back collar could be moved to about here and that would be good. But it's okay. It's still moving forward. Yeah. So this one is close, I feel, but it seems like it's too blocky here and too pushed here. So what I would say is this one is too much of a chimera where there's different parts that aren't quite matching. In this case, he feels like he's got too small of a back of a head and a lot of a front of a head. So yeah, still working on it. Here I'm trying to do some three-dimensional thinking with these contour lines. This one is a complete disaster. Looks like the head is like pulled off, like the face is just getting extruded, which isn't that pretty. And then I guess I was overthinking it and I wasn't thinking about basic shapes first, so then I tried to think about more basic shapes and then break it down. But I am getting more practice with this smaller proportion. Bob Meatbag called them midgets, so I guess they're like midget proportions. I don't know. So yeah, more bodies, body shape things, and then yeah, I think this one's okay. The breasts are weirdly placed. A lot of weirdness, but moving in the right direction. This was for just some thumbnails for a promotional thing for a video game called The Padre. And I think I ended up using this one and this one. And I think there's a YouTube video with them. But anyway, that was that. And then here, just continuing on, I like this face. I like the Empress-y stuff going on, but it's not got much cohesion or connection to an idea. So it's very neither here nor there. It's all over the place. Kind of like this one, and I quite like this one, how pushed it is, how long the neck is, but the neck is really long, but the head is also really long, so it kind of feels okay. And then the arms are long, so that also feels okay, and the collar is long. So it's the repetition of a bunch of principles, I guess, which make the design language. And then here, I don't know, I kind of really went off the deep end, I guess. I started doing a bunch of continuous line contours, basically where you put your pen down and then you don't really take it off the page. Some of these aren't. Some of these I did lift the pen, especially this one. See, for the shading, I lifted the pen off the page. But these ones, I mean, with proper continuous line contours, you can kind of follow the starting. I don't know if I started here. This one looks like it got picked up, though. But you can kind of follow a line and see where it went. And then it goes up here. And then kind of find the journey that was made to get this. Yeah, this one's... I mean, some of these are okay. I don't really mind them. They're just very different than what I was doing. And sometimes I feel like my brain just needs a rest from certain things, or maybe other parts of me need a chance to have some expression as well. And so I just ended up going with it and like, okay, let's just do this for a while. So it's something I kind of encourage, where if you feel like you need to go down some rabbit hole or another just to experiment, or because you feel kind of bored or you're feeling burnt out, you don't necessarily have to feel like, well, you're going to change everything and that's the end of it and you're drawing differently now and this is it. This is the new normal. You don't really have to panic about it or feel like you're going to lose something. I think it's better to embrace these things and just go with it, because you will get over it. I mean, for me anyway, that's been the case. If it's important, it will stick. Or it will recur. Like you might have to revisit it a bunch of times. But it's not like I get stuck forever on these things. It's more like, oh, they're there for a while. And I have a sneaking suspicion it's just a different part of me that's drawing and wants to have their say too, in a way, you know, because I draw a lot of my stuff, but then what do they do? Well, they have to draw their stuff. I guess here it looks like a combination of me trying to do that thing but not quite getting it, and then yeah, but it does create some new stuff, some interesting things. Like I usually don't draw people with clothing and stuff, but it's easier in a way to imagine it when I'm just doing these things, because I guess it's more intuitive. I'm not really thinking. I just put the line down and then I really just let the pen go where it will, and I'm trusting that a part of me is controlling my hand and making the pen go somewhere. But yeah, that's that. So I'm still continuing on with the continuous line stuff. Wow, this one's kind of interesting. It feels in some ways a lot more expressive with these types of lines. Feels like, especially with like this one, maybe even this one to a point, that there is more emotion involved, or yeah, expression. But yeah, see here, got out of it. So here I guess I'm trying to put in more caricature. I really like this face, how pushed it is. And I also like how the body is, how small it is, how thin it is, but it's working well. So this is a good sign. It lets me know you don't have to make things realistic in order to make them look right. You have, within your own things, you have a certain... it's like its own universe where it's got different rules, but they're still rules. They're just different than the ones in our universe. If that makes sense. So just drawing hands from imagination and just random shape things. This person, a bit weird. Yeah, so I guess the lines are looking a lot less confident here. I'm wondering what's going on. I wonder if it was just a bad day, but it looks very scribbly and unsure. And all of these look really, really uncertain. So yeah, I can't really remember exactly what was going on, but it seems like something. So here I was doing more with these scribbly things, trying to build up tone. And then I thought, why don't I try to paint with acrylics and really thin them down. It's just one color. I think it's Payne's Gray, and it's thinned down with water. So it's very thin. It behaves much more like watercolor than acrylic. I mean, it does behave like acrylic, but acrylic can behave like watercolor if you thin it down with enough water, or it can be used much more of an impasto if you just use it straight out of the tube without any thinning, where you can also apply lots of different mediums to it. So I thought it was okay. I would have kept doing it. These are just tests with a brush to see like, oh, what kind of marks can I make here? I was trying to make straight lines, so I was just taking the brush and tapping it to make these lines. And then these ones, of course, I'm dragging the brush here. I'm kind of flicking the brush to get these. But yeah, the thing was, it was okay. It was okay as an experiment, but my paper just couldn't hold up to it. It was warping it a lot. I mean, you can even see on the scan just how, and this is when it's flattened, but how much warping there is. If I was gonna do this, I would probably have to use better paper, maybe a watercolor paper, something just heavier to do this, and then it would potentially work. But I was kind of curious what would happen if I add some colors in Photoshop really quickly. And I think it's okay. Sort of creates an interesting look with this hybrid of traditional and digital. It's got a bit of the spontaneity of traditional with some of the marks and random splotchy areas, but it's also got, you can use more color and build tone. So, I don't know. I guess if I ever did it, it's sort of viable. But I did this super quick. I basically just used a color layer on Photoshop and also a multiply layer to get the whites to be a color, and then tried to use a brush with a bit of texture to make sure there's a bit of randomness still to it. But yeah, I mean, if I spend more time, I think I could make a better result. But for an experiment, I think it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, so more faces, a bit wonky in terms of drawing. I seem to be all over the place with these things. I can never just have one skill set. Like, oh, I've learned something and now I have it. I've learned something and now for now I have it, and maybe in a few hours I won't. I like this proportion though. Again, skinny body, much skinnier than or much more narrow than the width of the head. But overall, it's okay. And yeah, so, don't know what's with this expression, but looks like he's very, very into it. Whatever he's doing, he's certainly into it. And then just working with some different proportions. I think this kind of is working. It's kind of nice. The thinness, the thinning out of all the limbs. So things like that. Do you make your limbs thicker or thinner? How thick? And these are all things I guess you just get from experimenting. Clearly this guy is not quite working, but yeah, we're going to continue on. Next month is still this, in a way, still trying to smooth out a lot of rough edges. But again, it's moving forward to a goal, and it certainly does resolve at some point. So yeah, I hope you get something out of these. I hope it helps to have more of the paint over-y thing, so I can explain a bit more and show you visually what I mean, because before it was a lot of just, this sucks and I'm not really happy, but this one I actually can show you like, well, if I was going to change it, this is how I do it. So I hope this helped, and thanks for watching.